sub-project meeting on Network Policy V2. I want to remind everybody that this is a CNCF meeting and it's going to be governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So please conduct yourselves accordingly. So today, to bring everybody up to speed, we've been focused on reviewing use cases that have been submitted and suggested over the past several weeks. And last week, we began looking at a scoring system that would help us to objectively determine which use cases we wanted to advance to the next stage, in that where we actually go into more detail on working through those use cases so that we can get them prioritized appropriately and detailed enough so that it can be evaluated by the larger SIG network community. So to that end, there's a couple things that I wanted to bring up before we head into the agenda. Number one, it looks like we have quite a few people that are on this call, and I want to encourage everyone to jump in and participate. This is a call for both advanced users and even if you're brand new to network policy and you've got some questions and ideas on maybe you've used network policy and you've got some ideas on the ways that you would like to use it, don't feel like you can't jump in. If it's something that we need to take offline to bring you up to speed on something else, we could certainly do that, but we want everybody's input on this. This needs to be community driven, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak up and ask for the features that they're looking for network policy. Jay, I see that you have an agenda item. Do you want to jump in with that? Are you on the line?
Yeah, I think it's mostly resolved. I think that does need to be resolved at some point, but I think I'm probably outvoted on the idea that we could polish some more stuff off before we decide on a deliverable, which is okay with me.
Okay.
I think maybe as soon as possible, I think we should readdress that. I think that's important.
Okay. So right now, what Jay's talking about is we need to set some timelines and goals and frequency in terms of when we are meeting. Currently, we're meeting once a week from a frequency perspective. In terms of a timeline or a goal, we haven't set a timeline for the final review of these issues. A lot of that is because we've just recently become a sub-project underneath SIG Network. And so a lot of the last couple of weeks have not only been it's been mostly focused on bringing people up to speed on some of the prior work that has been done in this area and beginning to develop a system for evaluating these ideas. We can certainly discuss a timeline today if anybody has some suggestions on that, although it's something that I would suggest that we try to accomplish this certainly within the next 2 months at a minimum amount of time. I think that we still probably have some people in the community that may not be completely aware of the sub project, and we want to get involved as well. To go on, I want to open the floor before we actually get into going through the list of user stories that have been submitted and beginning to possibly score them with some objective criteria. I want to open the floor to any outstanding issues or topics that the rest of the participants might want to bring up or discuss today.
So I think 2 months to nail down the user stories or use cases seem pretty reasonable. But I know folks like Jay and Ricardo who have been kind of discussing this for the last 4 months. Maybe it's a bit repetitive, but I know that there are a lot of folks on the call that might not be caught up. So I personally think that's reasonable, but I don't know, maybe Ricardo or Jay, if you have other opinions on maybe picking this up faster, might be a good time to chat about it. Or if people think that we need to slow down more and just talk through the use cases a bit more. Open to that too.
I think it's fair. I mean, it's not a huge deal either way. I don't think it's a huge problem for me.
We certainly won't have enough detail before we take it to the larger group, I think. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody. Go ahead and speak up.
No, it was me. My point was like we could probably take Dan's work and start hacking something else just to parallelize things and deliver some value of what we've already done. Like, okay, this can be a V1 network policy at all. But I also understand that like we have a lot of moving parts and we need to be sure if this is really what we want to deliver in V1 or V2. So this is most of my point was if we should parallelize and keep this V2 job as something more complex and bringing the V1 cases to like, okay, let's do it. Or if we should wait until we conclude everything of this. Also, I'm like in favor of trying to do more async communications, like using Slack and those things, because I'm not like kind of productive in those meetings at all. So we wait 1 week and discuss again, and we wait one week again. So this was my point, Andrew. Like, can we make this more productive?
Good point.
Yeah, I think that's the real goal that I think me and Ricardo both have, is productivity is probably more important than what we actually do. And this is a very serialized format that we have, and we're not getting a lot of engagement,
Sure. We can certainly move more to async. Would it help in doing that to change the frequency of the in-person meeting to like 2 weeks, and to give the participants more time during that 2 week span to engage with the documents and the user stories and their comments and such asynchronously? Would that be more reasonable? Or do we want to keep the same frequency in person?
I think so. Do we want to readdress whether another medium for sharing these stories might be worth looking at? I mean, I'm okay with changing the frequency for sure. But I know Ricardo had mentioned something else as well, like where we can more easily track issues and kind of have a little more formal way of writing things up and adding content that's a little more flexible as we flesh things out.
Any other opinion besides me, Jay, and Andrew, and Ricardo?
We're at a point where meetings aren't a productive way of doing what needs to
Agreed.
get done, because what needs to get done is not everybody hashing things out. Like we need a proposal at this point, and
Okay.
then we can talk about that and as a group and say this part is good and this part is bad. But we need a concrete proposal of this is where we're going next.
Yes.
Okay.
I 100% agree with that. And that's exactly what we need to be working on, I think.
And I think that's the sort of thing that somebody or some small number of people need to do and then bring back to the group, because, scoring all of the different use cases and deciding to implement the ones that have the highest scores, I don't think that really either picks out the most value or the most interest. Certainly not the most value.
Yeah, I guess my only concern there would be, like I'm not getting the sense that folks have spoken up, and like I guess the concern is like whoever's writing the CAP is going to, or the proposal is going to put the use cases that they think are important to move forward. So like, yeah, like
Right.
from my perspective, I'd love to hear like what are important to other people, and we as a group can like go back and forth and figure out what those are before we put it in writing. or maybe we've already agreed on that, and I'm the only person who thinks that we haven't.
No, I think we haven't. But I mean, people have been talking about these use cases for months now, and are we getting any closer to having decided which ones are important and which ones aren't?
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah,
So that's what the scoring. I mean, like that's not that scoring is a perfect way to do that, but the scoring would give us kind of numbers to work with to help us gauge where people are at, right?
But the scores that we were talking about last week weren't about interest or or usefulness. It was more about I'm forgetting the categories now, but it's like, does it fit within the API?
Right, but weren't we going to then go through every use case and apply like each person here was supposed to go through all those and set like a score based on each category? Or at least that was my understanding of what we're going to do next. Like, would that be helpful here? To like get individuals' perspective on each category?
So SIG Network has always had this problem that there are way too many people and we all have way too many ideas and different agendas and directions. And if you try to be too collaborative, you end up going around in circles for 6 months and not doing anything. The only time anything actually happens is when somebody says, okay, we're going to do this now. And then people could be like, oh, wait, you forgot this part, or yes, I love that part. But like, I don't know, I just feel like we need more of a plan to coalesce around rather than voting as a group for a plan.
So I 100% agree with that. I guess the question I have then is like, do we feel like we've waited long enough and kind of let this steep long enough for us to do that? I guess like that's what it boils down to. Because I agree, we need to put like we need to cut off at a certain point in time and say like, okay, we've thought about this long enough. We're gonna go execute.
I mean, on today's call to quantify it, we have 15 people here, and every single person here has been a part of this group for several months. So I don't know what new opinions we would be getting today. Except for I think Yang Ding and maybe Steve Vital, but I believe I've seen Steve Vital before.
Okay.
What do you guys think of maybe some set of people come forward with a proposal which takes care of all the use cases that we have right now, and then we pick out the use cases that do not make sense, or listen to the proposal with the CRD in whatever form we come up with, and then we pick out which is something that is not making sense for the community. And in the meantime, maybe somebody during this KubeCon shamelessly plugs in this network policy API group into the SIG network update and have more people trying to have a look at this user stories and add more comments, and then we iterate over the CRD spec so that we have something to start with. And then once we have a spec, then I guess people will have more opinions whether node selector doesn't work in this way, or this is not an important use case. I don't know whether maybe that's a step forward, but also helps us define the API with I don't know, just an idea.
So I'm in agreement with Dan on this. Like we do need to move forward. I have been erring on the side of collaboration, making sure that I wanted to get as much input from the community as possible. I would be willing to help draft an initial proposal if I could get a couple of additional volunteers to help me proof and add content to that draft. If somebody wants to volunteer, the one challenge that I would like to do is I know that we've got representatives from different companies and users, et cetera, user interest, in this meeting. And I would prefer that as we draft this as much as we can, try to, I don't want it to all be from either one company or one user interest, right? I'd like to have a little diversity in the drafting of that document. Is there anybody who would like to step up and volunteer with me on that?
I can help like the side of the user stories, user case, the end user.
Okay.
So I can help you.
I'm in for sure, Cody. If we're doing real work, then I'm definitely going to help. If we're doing something and we're building something, that's what I'm here for. So yeah.
And yeah, I can also try to help with it.
Yeah, I'll also volunteer. This is Govind from Google.
Okay. Anish, where are you from?
Microsoft.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry, I overlap with Jay, but Cody, count me in.
And Ricardo, remind me where you're from again?
That's a SARPRO, SARPRO.
SAR.
SER, sorry. PRO.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So there's a start right there. So we've got a couple of volunteers. If anybody else wants to join, what I think we should do to make the most of everyone's time and not to rehash things over and over, I think that we need to have this initial draft of a document ready before the next meeting. And it doesn't have to be complete by any means, but at least have an initial draft ready, and we can begin reviewing sections or discussing what was included in that draft. Any objections to that?
Are we gonna call out like specific parts and stuff? And how are we I'm very new to this. I'm just trying to understand how are we organizing ourselves.
Yep, I'm about to get into that. So
okay, thanks.
So in terms of the proposal itself, I think there's probably a couple of sections that we need to cover. I think that, in introducing what's going on, I think we need to talk about, maybe review, the original purpose of network policy. And of course, I'm just thinking on the fly here. So please, correct me or, I think we need to, basically answer the question kind of why V2. What other topics do you think we need to include in this proposal for review with SIG Network?
Maybe the problems you want to solve, like historic problems, not exactly what is written in the issues, but.
Yep. That'd be part of why. Yep. Other ideas?
And what we aren't solving and or why we aren't solving that. Or what we're leaving for later.
Okay, great.
So to clarify, are we bundling V1 and V2 updates in the same proposal, or is this proposal specifically for V2?
I was thinking that this proposal needs to talk about how we're evolving network policy regardless of which API we're updating. So gotcha. I think it would probably contain both V1 and V2. I think we need to at least set put a stake in the sand. This is the context we started at, right? Here's where network policy originated from, right? Kind of the initial problems it set out to solve. What are the new problems that we're encountering, or what historically wasn't solved, right? And then, what are what are we not trying to accomplish with this group, as was just pointed out. And then
would there be a reason not to just go right to a KEP, go to the KEP format, at least start filling it out with what we do know, aside from things like some of the newer stuff, it gets a lot more complex, but
Okay. Thoughts on
yeah, I
that,
mean,
anyone?
it would be nice to have like a in-between thing, but I think similar to what was discussed before, it's just another interim step that's not going to get closer to the desire anytime soon, I would say.
I mean, even if we don't,
that being like a merged KEP with
even if we don't submit a cap,
plan.
like, well, what if Chris, maybe someone like, you know, people come back to the next meeting with artifacts that they think we could submit as caps, that, you know, like, we could talk about that for 15 minutes. I don't know. Would that be the end of the world?
Christopher, are you suggesting the entire proposal be a single cap, or should we break this into multiple caps?
I would probably have multiple KEPs, one for V1 and one for V2. The easier one would be V1, I would say, in terms of getting merged, just because you can make things. I mean, it takes a couple of releases to change an existing API, but at least that's an easier pill to swallow than a V2.
Okay. That sounds reasonable.
I believe, Dan, you also mentioned at least some of these things were small enough that they were capable as is, right? I don't remember.
I don't think I said that, but yes, that's true.
Yeah, so I think if we're writing a cap, there's an assumption that we would be proposing API changes. Yeah, just pointing that out. If we feel like we're at a place where we can propose API changes already.
Okay. So
yeah,
go ahead.
We can also put for who is this directed, because we have like V1 is directed for the end users. V2, so what's the scope of this? Like, that's for cluster admins, that's for the end user, that's for everybody. I think this probably needs to be written so we can also remember the historic of why the decisions were made.
Okay, I put define network policy personas. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's great. The V1, like Zen always repeat that V1 was designed only for the end users, for the developers, and we are designing the V2 for like a lot of different personas. So yes, that's okay.
Okay.
So we are sort of trending towards, I think, what seemed like the natural splitting of the group, which is some folks want to work on concrete KEPs potentially. Other folks want to work on a theoretical proposal that ties everything together. And I think there's one other group of people that's left, that's just people who actually maybe want to hack out a CRD. And all three of those has been proposed on this call by different people, which I believe is actually the natural topology of the group. And I think that would allow us to be smaller groups that can do status updates in these meetings, which is something you proposed a while back, Cody. Are we close enough to that we can just kind of propose that as the natural separation between these different work items, which seem to be kind of coming together here?
Who has the, I think so. Who has the, or I'm just going to look for the Kubernetes KEP format here, just so I can bring that up here. KEP template. That's what I want, right? Nope, that doesn't work.
It's under the enhancements repository.
Enhancements repository. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's pretty complex as of recently. But a lot of the questions that have been posted in the spreadsheet you have are covered by topics that are in the KEP format.
KEP's subdirectory.
Thank you.
And then the very top NNNN KEP template.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to link this in just so everybody knows what we're talking about here. All right. And
so going back to Jay's point, like, so I'm of the opinion that we can split off into different groups and kind of like squads or whatever. But that would all be based on like a central group of use cases that we've agreed on are the, you know, the priorities for whatever work we're doing going forward. So like, I guess my question is like, do we as a group here, like agree that what we have is good enough to do that? Because like, from my perspective, like so we've been meeting for like about a month now. Like 1 month is a pretty short time to, like, I thought the user stories were going to take like, you know, at most 6 months, maybe, you know, maybe 4 or 3 months optimistically. So like, if we as a group here, I don't know, maybe we can do like a vote on chat or something, but like, do we feel confident enough with the user stories to do that?
So before this group existed, there was the previous group, right? And they kind of did go over the user stories for 6 months. If I think that's my understanding. And I was sort of assuming people were tired of reading the user stories and that's why we weren't making any progress, but maybe I'm confused.
And by the way, do you have a reference to that before groups user stories, which went on for 6 months?
Not 6. I think he's exaggerating, but Abhishek, you were in that group. We were meeting for 3 months.
Or the solid, I mean, okay, I understand. Sorry.
I mean, it was the same group. It just wasn't formally a working group yet at that point.
So if we moved forward on this, and I'm all about trying to move us forward here. So maybe we take this KEP outline and we start divvying up some responsibilities to the ones who volunteered just now, at least as a starting point. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, so I think my comment earlier was just that I just didn't want folks like putting in a bunch of work on KEPs, and then, you know, when we haven't actually agreed on like what we think are the important use cases we want to address. So like, if I'm the only person that thinks we haven't spent enough time on that, then like feel free to ignore me. Just wanted to make sure like we did due diligence on like agreeing as a group on like what we're trying to solve first before we go and write stuff and propose changes. But again, like, just ignore me if I'm the only one.
I agree with you, Andrew. I don't think we have decided what we want to do. We have a lot of user stories, but at least in the meetings I've been in, we have not talked about which of them are actually good ideas.
Do we want to do that? So I've heard 2 different competing ideas here. One is that some find that the verbal discussion of that is not advancing, and we need to do an asynchronous we need asynchronous communication, right, to get comments on these things. Do we want to use the remainder of the time to talk about what we think are good ideas and bad ideas, or do we want to say, if you think it's a good idea, it's your responsibility within the next week to make comments as such on those? To help facilitate that, we may create take the list of ideas that we have and have an easy way for people to add, new comments on them so that we can distinguish from previous discussions that we've had, so that people can weigh in and say, hey, I think this is a good idea, or I don't think this is a good idea. And that be a place to start from next meeting.
I mean, I think some of these ideas have to be explored before we're going to be able to really make a binary call on good or bad. And I think that's the circle that we're in.
Right. But to be fair, that's what we've been doing, right? So every call, we've been going over these user stories and talking a little bit about what they mean. We may not have gone to the level of detail we wanted. Look, I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to understand what we think is going to be the best use of our time and the most valuable way to solicit feedback here. If we think that an asynchronous, written form is going to solicit better feedback, then I would suggest that we give that a shot before the next meeting instead of spending the time here to do it, unless anybody disagrees with that, since that's been suggested.
Anyone have opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe one one last comb through over the next week, comment in the Google Doc on, do you think this is a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Then come back next week and have that general discussion.
Comments are
I mean, I think the KEP thing, I thought we were further along than, because we've kind of identified things we've color coded them, I guess. So now it's just really, is this a good idea?
So I missed the first few meetings, so maybe that did happen and I just didn't see it, or I don't know.
Jay or
Yeah, that's saying
Andrew
more
would probably have a better idea.
consensus on definition, not whether it's a good idea.
We used to have yellow, but I think we switched to red and green. I don't know.
Right. So like, I remember that we color coded things based on like, does this make sense? Like, do we agree on if this user story is like, if it makes sense? But then like, I don't think we talked about like, how important is one compared to the other? And like, we don't need to get it perfect, but I feel like as a group, we should be able to say like, okay, like these handful of the things are the things we're going to target for, V1 editions or whatever.
We should not implement the simple things because they're simple and ignore the difficult ones, which are more popular.
Right.
I think that, part of this is like, when I say like, when you explore these, I don't mean like just throwing out like opinions, but more like we need to actually some people need to do at least some mental struggling with integrating the concepts in order to conceptualize these properly, just because that's how humans think, not because it's efficient. It's inefficient, but it's tends to be the way that people conceptualize things. And that's gonna, I think, require some people exploring these things on their own time to build some kind of a thing that might be redundant to what other people are building, and then present that in some way, or share that in some way. Which is better done in smaller breakout groups, I think.
The only other point I will add is we have done an initial pass at eliminating a lot of ideas that have come up, right? So I wouldn't say that we've selected from the remaining list or prioritized those, but we have made at least a high level filter of what doesn't make sense for this group. So what's out of scope?
Yeah, the spreadsheet or Dan's doc or both?
Both, I think, have covered a lot of that. So let's take this approach. I think that there's been a lot of good feedback here, and I'd like to see that feedback in written form and give the participants on this call an opportunity to voice in and talk about why the various user stories are important to them and why they think it would be a good idea for us, or why not they would think it would be a good idea to implement this. And then for the next meeting, we need to, the small group of volunteers, we need to set a deadline, I would say, of something like, Wednesday or Thursday of next week to have all those comments in, so that we can take those comments and organize them in a way that, hopefully does some type of a sort on the user stories that we have, so we can at least focus on the ones that people were vocal about in the next call, instead of us trying to, haphazardly skip through the issues and figure out, what we need to talk about. Does that sound like an approach that would be valuable to everyone?
I think that's a reasonable path forward. I think it's a reasonable compromise between all the views here, between like some of us that are a little more trying to jump the gun and others that are trying to be a little more conservative with things. I think that kind of balances it all out. You're a good moderator, Cody.
Well, I think the thing here that maybe Dan's alluding to and Andrew alluding to, I think it's going to be easier to criticize the painting once we get some painting up on the canvas, and we've got to get some painting on the canvas right now. It's we just got we got a palette laid out in front of us, right, and nobody's painted anything on the canvas. Sorry, that's my use of analogies.
We
for
don't
the
even
day,
have
but-
like
we don't even have a palette, right?
Art we're making.
There you go. So, and there may be some sections on the KEP too that we could go ahead and start writing, right, that talk about the purpose and the scope of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're not trying to accomplish, that will help guide the selection of those user stories as well.
Would it be reasonable to split, give, like Chris mentioned the KEP thing? Would it be reasonable to say, kind of have some people that led in different areas, like maybe not, maybe like Chris, I don't know if you or someone else maybe would be interested in leading the area of what is in a KEP and what's not, and organizing those so that we could funnel up some.
Well, I think we could at least these three things here, right? Well, maybe not summary, but we could at least hit motivation and goals and non-goals, right? Could we not complete those and start working on those areas to help guide the selection for the actual stories?
Oh yeah, do all those together, and then we can kind of break up a little.
Yeah, so I think you can get a KEP merged as provisional. So it would include the summary, motivation, and maybe the user stories. And then it wouldn't be implementable until we actually propose API changes, but you can get it accepted as provisional. Yeah.
So I can drive this, at least getting this created and started, so we can get a PR ready. And we've got a list of volunteers I'll be pinging. If you wouldn't mind, this spreadsheet should be editable, and I believe, Jay, you created a link on the agenda doc to this spreadsheet.
Yeah.
If you could please, if you list some contact information or a Slack handle or something next to your name, so that I can reach out to you so I can pester you if I don't see any work from you over the next week. I'd like to get some movement on this. At least get these first sections started, and also let's get some comments on what we think are the best stories to go after and what we want to avoid before our next meeting. I think that will allow us to move forward.
Okay. Yeah. So who is this subgroup? Just to be clear where we're at and where we're going. So who the subgroup is? The people of names you have here: Cody, Ricardo, Jay, Anish, Abhishek, Gobind.
I currently have these volunteers that have said they will help write these. What I can do is I can create the KEP and get a PR going on the KEP. I will at least do an initial draft of some of those sections, and then let's start doing. Let's just start taking your contributions on those different sections and get it ready to submit a provisional PR.
Yeah, and then I guess we can have further conversations around user stories in the KEP PR and try to
of
get
course
consensus on the.
Of course.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
With the KEP, should we have and I'm not as familiar with the KEP process, so please, somebody that is, chime in here. Can we have a master KEP and then have individual KEPs, kind of a parent-child relationship between the different user stories, or how would we do that? If we wanted to capture some larger ideas about what we're trying to accomplish in terms of the goals, and then have some smaller KEPs that actually that drive into the actual user stories. Is that how that works, or is there a different approach I should take?
There's no explicit parent-child relationships, or
okay.
Well, yeah, or there is something with you can say that one supersedes another one or something like that. I'm not sure if they're part whole relationships, but for the most part, you know, keps are cheap. You just make more keps and
Okay.
say what you need to say.
Okay. Fair enough. So maybe we have one KEP that talks about kind of the overarching goals, and then we use the other KEPs to drive into specific user stories, and we maybe reference those user stories from the KEP that talks about the larger goals.
You could wrap it into like a bigger enhancement issue as well, and then subdivide off keps from there.
Yeah,
And you can
that's
keep
fine.
everything in
That's
the
fine.
enhancement.
Yeah, that's great.
But,
And then-
but basically, it allows us to, kind of give I don't want the whole KEP to get stalled because there's, a couple of user stories that we have disagreement on. Right? If there's certain user stories that are like, yep, that looks good, then we can start moving forward on things that we have consensus on, and it doesn't like stall out the entire KEP.
One of the things that I've, sorry, go ahead. So I wasn't sure who was speaking. My apologies if I cut you off. Anyway, I just wanted to say, like, maybe this has been discussed, but one of the things that I think with our user stories was not super clear to me was that, what were the goals? I think that having those defined by the structure of a KEP would be super valuable, because then we have a way to sort of project those user stories on the goals and say yes and no in a definitive manner. So I think having an explicit discussion about those with the KEP format is super valuable.
I completely agree. And I think for this next week, we focus on the larger KEP. I say larger, the one focused on the kind of the overarching goals. And then after we get some initial comments back on the existing user stories, then I think in the next meeting, we can decide which of those user stories we would like to open KEPs on.
Makes total sense to me. On board.
Okay. And then that would give us a mechanism to debate each one of those individually in the KEP format, which I like.
Okay, cool. I would like to, after that, have like some people that lead those individual KEPs so that we could really
Agreed.
keep engagement
Yeah.
level high. And I don't want the group to get small because people are waiting for approval from the gods to do things, So I would encourage people, if you're interested in playing with this stuff, play with it, even if it's not in this official thing that we're doing, and then help us merge your work in together, even if it's going to be a little chaotic. I think it's more fun that way, right?
Okay, so I agree with that. We have 12 minutes left. I want to be cognizant and again, use everybody's time wisely here. Is there any other business that we want to accomplish, or do we feel that we have consensus on how to move forward before our next meeting? With the understanding that there's some follow-up that I need to do in terms of the volunteers that listed, get an initial KEP open, and also ensure that I think all the comments in Google Docs are dated, correct? What I want to do is I'd like to filter out and only take the latest. Well, what does the group think? Should we only take the latest comments against user stories in deciding which KEPs to open next meeting, or should we consider all the comments that have made up to this date?
Sorry, if I understand this correctly, should we not wait until the goals are complete before we take that action? Or did I misunderstand?
We could do that. I think that there are some goals that may come out of looking at some of the individual user stories, but we can certainly separate those two. I don't know that it would hurt working on them in parallel though either.
Understood.
Thoughts? Anybody want to take more of a serial approach to get the goals done first and then evaluate the individual user stories?
I mean, we can't really evaluate the individual user stories if we don't know what our overarching goal is, right?
Okay, fair enough. So let's take a serial approach then. So we open up the larger KEP, define the goals and the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with this effort, and then next week we review that as a group. We try to have at least an initial draft done by mid next week. We'll say Wednesday, so that we have ample time for some comments, and then we will open this up Thursday
Are the 5 or 6 of us going to
I mean,
work?
next Monday for another review.
Are the 5 or 6 or whoever of us going to work on this during the week so that we have something from Monday to show?
So I'll commit to starting a draft no later than tomorrow.
Cool.
And get that in place. And then once we have that initial check-in, people can start adding to that draft as they see fit.
Yep. Yeah. I'll also commit to contributing to that as part of this volunteer effort.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Cool. Everybody just add your names, whatever emails in the Google Doc or on that spreadsheet or somewhere so we can get in touch, or just ping us in Sig Network if.
Yeah. I just figured out how to like, I somehow was missing email addresses and stuff, and Jay, I didn't know how to contact you offline, and I was like, what do I do?
I sent you a message on Slack. I slacked you like 3 times. I was like, maybe he doesn't like me. All right, whatever.
No, I don't know how to, like, I don't have a Slack client running, and I'm very new to open source, so I was like completely like off base here, so I apologize. But
cool.
yes, let's figure out how to, like, I'll onboard onto Slack or something, and maybe that'll make life easier.
Yeah, let's hang out maybe informally sometime this week. Whoever this group of us is, we'll announce it on Sig Network so it's not secret or anything.
Sounds
Sure, absolutely.
Let's get a small group together and start doing stuff.
Perfect. Thanks.
Well, I want to. This is the first time I've really kind of like moderated this group, but I want to thank everyone for jumping in and giving some really sound advice and feedback today. Looking forward to the progress we're going to make over the next couple of weeks with this new direction forward. And as always, please let me or any of the others in the group know if maybe there's something you're not as comfortable in speaking in the larger group, but you want to be heard. Definitely use the opportunity for comments in other places to let us know what your feedback is. Again, we, as a CNCF sub project, we want as many participants as we can, and love for you to jump in and get involved.
So
With
one quick sort of protocol
Sure.
question. Is this, like, what is their general recommendation? Is it to use your personal Gmail or the company, email? I don't know. Like, I'm very new to all this.
Great question.
I use Gmail, but I don't think we're supposed to. I don't know.
Yeah, I use my company and then I flipped over to Gmail. So
I mean, I'm happy to go back to my Google address. I just wasn't sure what the protocol is.
I don't think that there's a set protocol that you have to use one or the either. Some companies may have an internal protocol that,
Okay.
they desire
Maybe
you
I'll,
to represent them, with one identity versus another one. But I don't know if there's a set standard there.
Okay, I'll use my Google
I
one.
think at Google, y'all use google.com. Like, I think that's what Brian Grant and Tim and everyone uses, right?
All right, that's perfect then. Thank you, Jay, for that insight. It's always good to be sure. Maybe this way I'll also keep my work and my personal life separated a little more.
I know,
which
me
is
and
harder and
Andrew
harder.
both use Gmail. I was wondering the other day, I was like, let me see what Andrew uses, and he used Gmail. So I was like, okay, that's good. I can keep using it.
Thanks for indulging me on that.
No problem. So with that, I'm going to end the meeting, and we will convene next Monday at the same time. And hopefully we will have a draft ready for discussion in terms of an initial cap. Any other comments before we close the meeting?
If there's nothing else, I just thought of something. So we recently just published a few template network policies. They're all open source. And this is all, like, it feels like this is the right group, if any, to, like, have a discussion around templates and what's useful to our general sort of Kubernetes audience. It's completely like, it's on GitHub, it's open source. It's everybody can, feel free to sort of check it out and propose changes, propose additional sort of templates that you think are useful. Like, it's an open, repository. So happy to put that link in to, I guess, Slack or one of the docs here if people want to check it out. So we have common cases like default deny and denying internet traffic and denying a kube system, any excessive sort of networking privileges and stuff and things like that. So we have some basic sort of networking policies.
I would say that if it's useful in us determining what advances we need to be making in network policy, that would be fine. I think if it's something more general,
Yeah.
then that may be something more appropriate for the larger SIG network group. So I have no problems with you placing the link in there if it's something that's certainly going to help us, look at the way network policy is being used today and what use cases we may not be considering.
Understood.
Also, Goben, let's talk about that later because I wanted to work on improving the docs for network policies upstream. So, like personally, I just think it would be really cool if everybody used network policies. So, like if we could actually do that as a group, then we would have.
Yeah. One of the things that we realized was that, it sounds very easy to say, yeah, just implement a default deny policy. And then the moment you start writing one, you're like, holy cow, this is really hard. How do you not break kubedns and other stuff that's required for a cluster to stay up and running, but you still have a default deny policy for your other workloads? It gets challenging. So we just decided to take it upon ourselves and publish some of these.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think
So Jay, you need to make that one of your goals in the larger cap, if that's what we want to set out to accomplish.
Yeah, for sure. I'm real supportive of that. I think random stuff is great, so I'd be happy for you to share that in this group. I'm not too worried about having go off grid. So please do share.
Okay, sounds good. Jay, I'll probably try to ping you over email, and then maybe you can help me see the ropes on Slack for Kubernetes and stuff like that. So.
Thanks. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and bring an end to the meeting. If you want to be part of the agenda next meeting, please make sure to check out our agenda document. Jay, it's linked from the GitHub SIG Network repository, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so make sure and add the agenda item you would like to discuss in the next SIG network. I'm sorry, the next working group meeting. With that, again, I appreciate all your participation and looking forward to the next time we get together. We will put out an invite later on for the volunteers to meet up sometime next week. And again, thank you to the volunteers for putting forth the effort to get us a draft started. That's all we have. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.